Right now, as you watch this video, you're performing one of the most complex computational processes in the known universe. Your brain is processing visual information, converting sound waves into meaning, maintaining your heartbeat, regulating temperature, and somehow weaving all of this into conscious experience. Yet you're not thinking about any of it. It just happens. This is the paradox we're exploring today. Life, at its most fundamental level, flows with an almost effortless simplicity. We breathe without instruction manuals. We fall asleep without conscious control. We digest food through processes we barely understand. And yet, somehow, we've managed to make living extraordinarily complicated. The question isn't whether life contains genuine difficulties. It obviously does. The question is whether we've added unnecessary layers of complexity that transform manageable challenges into overwhelming burdens. And if so, why do we do this to ourselves? The phenomenology of everyday complexity. Let's start with what philosophers call phenomenology, the careful description of lived experience. Consider how you started your day. Did you wake up and simply respond to hunger by eating? Or did you first check your phone, compare your life to curated social media posts, worry about emails, plan your outfit based on others' potential judgments, and turn breakfast into an optimization problem involving calories, nutrients, time management, and social signaling? The philosopher David Chalmers revolutionized our understanding of consciousness by distinguishing between what he calls the easy problems and the hard problem. The easy problems of consciousness, though technically complex, include things like processing information, controlling behavior, and integrating sensory data. The hard problem is explaining why there's any subjective experience at all, why anything feels like anything from the inside. But there's an interesting parallel in how we live. Life presents us with what we might call easy problems: finding food, seeking shelter, forming relationships, pursuing meaning. These aren't trivial, but they're the kinds of challenges humans have successfully navigated for millennia. Then, we create what I'll call hard problems of living: elaborate social hierarchies, complex status games, infinite optimization spirals, and abstract anxieties about abstract futures. Daniel Dennett, known for his deflationary approach to consciousness, might suggest we're making the same category error with life that dualists make with mind. We're treating what could be straightforward biological and social processes as if they require some mysterious extra ingredient: success, productivity, optimization, constant growth. Watch any other species. A bird builds a nest, finds food, mates, raises offspring. There's struggle, certainly. Predators, weather, competition for resources. But there's no bird equivalent of, what will the other birds think of my nest? Or, am I living up to my full potential as a bird? Or, I should be more productive than yesterday. The extended mind thesis, developed by Andy Clark and David Chalmers, argues that our cognitive processes extend beyond our biological boundaries into our tools and environment. But perhaps we've extended our minds into systems that generate artificial complexity. Our smartphones don't just store information, they create endless feedback loops of comparison, validation seeking, and artificial urgency. The social construction of difficulty. The sociologist of knowledge might ask, how do we collectively construct the experience of life being hard? Judith Butler's work on performativity shows us how gender identity becomes real through repeated performance within social frameworks. Similarly, perhaps, life being hard becomes real through repeated performance within economic and cultural frameworks that require it to be hard. Consider the concept of work. For most of human history, work was directly connected to survival: hunt the animal, gather the plants, build the shelter. Now we have jobs that exist primarily to generate abstract value within systems of remarkable complexity. We've created elaborate rituals around productivity and professional development that often bear little relationship to actual human flourishing. The philosopher John Rawls asked us to imagine designing society from behind a veil of ignorance, not knowing what position we'd occupy. Would rational people behind such a veil design a system where the basic necessities of life require 40+ hours weekly of activities that many find meaningless? where healthcare is tied to employment status, where housing costs consume the majority of income. Jürgen Habermas distinguished between the life world, the realm of everyday communication and meaning-making, and system world, the realm of economic and administrative logic. His concern was that system world logic increasingly colonizes the life world, turning human relationships into strategic calculations and personal fulfillment into optimization problems. This colonization manifests in subtle ways. We don't just have friends, we network. We don't just learn, we upskill. We don't just live, we optimize our lifestyle. Each transformation takes something that could be straightforward and embeds it within systems of measurement, comparison, and improvement. Robert Brandam's work on social practice suggests that meaning emerges from our practices of giving and asking for reasons within communities. But what happens when our communities become organized around practices that systematically complicate rather than clarify? When our reasons for action become increasingly disconnected from direct human needs? The anthropologist David Graeber identified what he called bullshit jobs, employment that even the workers recognize as pointless. But the phenomenon extends beyond obviously meaningless work to meaningful work embedded in unnecessarily complex systems. A teacher who loves teaching but spends more time on documentation than education. A doctor who wants to heal but navigates insurance bureaucracies. A parent who wants to nurture but optimizes every aspect of child development. Cognitive biases and mental architecture. Our brains evolved for different challenges than those we face today. The cognitive biases that helped our ancestors survive, loss aversion, social comparison, future planning, now often create unnecessary suffering in environments of relative abundance and safety. Daniel Kahneman's work on System 1 and System 2 thinking reveals how our fast, automatic judgments often misfire in modern contexts. System 1 evaluates every situation for threats and opportunities using ancient criteria. A delayed email triggers the same stress response as a stalking predator. A social media post generates the same comparison anxiety as direct resource competition within a small tribe. But here's what's philosophically interesting. We often compound these natural cognitive biases with cultural ones. It's not just that we worry about whether we worry too much. We don't just compare ourselves to others, we compare our level of self-improvement to others' apparent self-improvement. We create meta-level complications on top of base-level challenges. The philosopher Tyler Burge's work on anti-individualism suggests that the content of our mental states depends partly on our social and physical environment. If Burge is right, then living in environments designed around artificial complexity literally changes the content of our thoughts. We're not the same thinkers we would be in simpler contexts. Consider attention. In a natural environment, attention flows toward what's relevant for survival and flourishing. Food, weather, social dynamics within small groups. In modern environments, $1,000 teams design systems specifically to capture and monetize attention. Every app, advertisement, and news cycle competes for cognitive resources using techniques refined through A/B testing and behavioral psychology. The result isn't just distraction, it's what we might call cognitive fragmentation. Instead of sustained attention on present experience, we develop habits of constant task switching, stimulus seeking, and mental time travel between past regrets and future anxieties. Susan Haack's work on foundationalism suggests that knowledge requires some basic, non-inferential beliefs as starting points. But what if our cultural environment makes it difficult to access basic, non-inferential experiences? What if we've created systems that require us to constantly justify our existence through performance metrics rather than simply allowing ourselves to exist? Paradox of choice and infinite optimization. Barry Schwartz documented how excessive choice can decrease rather than increase satisfaction and well-being. But the philosophical implications go deeper than consumer psychology. We've created cultural contexts where almost every aspect of life becomes a choice to be optimized rather than a given to be experienced. Previous generations might have had their professions, spouses, and worldviews largely determined by circumstances of birth and community. This certainly limited freedom, often unjustly. But it also provided what the philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre calls Thick concepts. Ways of understanding life that were embedded in particular traditions and practices. Now we have unprecedented freedom to choose our identities, careers, relationships, and belief systems. This is genuine progress in many ways. But it also means that every aspect of life becomes a project requiring research, decision-making, and ongoing evaluation. We don't just get married. We optimize relationship dynamics. We don't just eat. We research nutrition science. We don't just believe. We construct elaborate philosophical frameworks. The philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah writes about cosmopolitanism, the idea that we can be citizens of the world while maintaining local attachments. But cosmopolitanism requires sophisticated cognitive capabilities, holding multiple perspectives simultaneously, navigating cultural relativism, building identity across various contexts. These are remarkable human achievements, but they're also cognitively demanding in ways that village life simply wasn't. Graham Harman's object-oriented ontology reminds us that objects, including human beings, have rich interior lives that exceed their relationships and interactions. But modern life often feels like pure relationality. We exist primarily through our connections, comparisons, and performances rather than through simple being. Consider the difference between "I am hungry, so I will eat" and "I should optimize my nutrition while considering my fitness goals, environmental impact, social signaling, and Instagram aesthetic." Both responses to hunger are valid, but only one requires complex cognitive architecture. The tragedy isn't that we've developed sophisticated capabilities, it's that we've created cultural contexts where deployment of these capabilities feels mandatory rather than optional. We can think complexly about nutrition, but we feel like we must. We can optimize our relationships, but we feel like we should. Language, concepts, and reality. Construction. Ludwig Wittgenstein showed us that language doesn't just describe reality, it shapes what can count as real within particular language games. The concepts available to us determine what we can think, feel, and experience as possibilities. Modern languages have developed incredibly sophisticated vocabularies around productivity, optimization, and self-improvement. We have dozens of words for different types of professional development, various forms of anxiety, and multiple categories of lifestyle enhancement. But we have relatively impoverished vocabularies for simple presence, contentment, and what the Greeks called ataraxia, tranquil pleasure in ordinary existence. When Simon Blackburn writes about thick ethical concepts, he's pointing toward terms that combine descriptive and evaluative content in ways that can't be easily separated. Words like courage or kindness don't just describe behaviors, they embody particular ways of understanding what human life is for. But what thick concepts dominate contemporary discourse? Productivity, growth, achievement, success. These aren't neutral descriptions. They're evaluative frameworks that shape how we interpret our experience. A day spent reading poetry, walking slowly, or having meandering conversations can be experienced as wasted, not because it lacks intrinsic value, but because our dominant concepts frame it as unproductive. The philosopher Edmund Gettier famously challenged traditional definitions of knowledge by showing that justified true belief might not be sufficient. But there's a parallel Gettier problem with happiness. We might have genuine well-being without recognizing it, because our concepts of the good life require constant improvement rather than simple appreciation. Noam Chomsky's work on universal grammar suggests that all humans share deep linguistic structures, but the particular vocabulary and conceptual frameworks we inherit culturally determine what aspects of universal human experience we can easily recognize and cultivate. If this is right, then simplifying life isn't just about changing behaviors. It's about recovering language and concepts that make simple pleasures and basic contentment thinkable within our cultural context. Embodiment, presence, and the wisdom of the body. Maurice Merleau-Ponty reminded philosophy that we are not minds that happen to have bodies. We are embodied beings whose consciousness is always already bodily consciousness. But modern life often requires us to treat our bodies as objects to be managed, rather than as the living basis of our experience. The body knows how to breathe, digest, heal, and rest without conscious management. It knows when to be hungry and when to be satisfied. It knows the difference between tiredness that requires rest and restlessness that requires movement. But we've developed cultural practices that override these embodied forms of knowledge in favor of abstract systems of optimization. Hubert Dreyfus spent his career showing how much of human expertise involves embodied, non-representational knowledge, what he called skilled coping. A master craftsperson doesn't think through each movement. Their body knows what to do. Similarly, much of living well might involve embodied wisdom that our cognitive complexity actively interrupts. Consider sleep. The body has sophisticated circadian rhythms developed over millions of years of evolution. But we've created environments with artificial light, stimulating content, and optimization anxiety that require elaborate sleep hygiene protocols to achieve what should be natural. Or consider eating. Traditional cultures develop sustainable food practices through embodied wisdom transmitted across generations. Now, we need nutrition science, calorie counting, and dietary philosophy to navigate decisions that could be relatively straightforward responses to hunger, availability, and pleasure. The phenomenologist Drew Leder writes about the absent body, how the body disappears from consciousness when functioning well. When walking smoothly, we don't think about our legs. When digesting properly, we don't notice our stomach. Health involves a kind of bodily transparency. But modern life often makes the body present to consciousness as a problem to be solved, rather than allowing it to remain transparently functional. We're encouraged to monitor heart rate, optimize sleep cycles, track steps, and quantify biological processes that might function better with less conscious interference. This isn't an argument against medical care or health awareness. It's an observation that we might have overcorrected from traditional neglect of bodily health toward obsessive management of biological processes that have their own wisdom. Practical philosophy and the art of simple living. So what would it mean to live more simply without abandoning the genuine benefits of modernity? This isn't about returning to some imagined golden age, but about integrating contemporary capabilities with ancient wisdom about human flourishing. The Stoic philosophers develop practices for distinguishing between what is up to us and what is not up to us. Epictetus suggested that most human suffering comes from trying to control outcomes that lie beyond our direct influence. Modern life multiplies these category errors exponentially. We worry about economic systems, climate change, social media algorithms, and global politics as if our anxiety about them provides some form of control. But there's a difference between responsible engagement with large-scale challenges and the kind of diffuse anxiety that treats every problem as equally urgent and personally manageable. The Serenity Prayer captures this wisdom. Change what you can, accept what you cannot, and develop the discernment to know the difference. Probably practical simplicity might involve what we could call cognitive triage, deliberately choosing which complexities deserve mental energy and which can be simplified or ignored. Not every decision requires optimization. Not every opportunity requires evaluation. Not every problem requires your personal solution. Alan Gibbert's work on norm expressivism suggests that our evaluative judgments express attitudes rather than describing objective facts. If he's right, then much of what makes life feel hard consists of attitudes we've internalized rather than objective features of reality. The attitude that we must constantly improve ourselves, the attitude that simple pleasures are somehow insufficient, the attitude that busyness indicates importance. But attitudes can change, and changing attitudes can change lived experience more dramatically than changing external circumstances. Consider the difference between "I have to exercise to optimize my health metrics" and I enjoy moving my body. Same activity, completely different experience. One generates pressure and measurement, the other generates simple pleasure. Or consider, I should be more productive with my free time versus I have time to do whatever feels right. The first attitude turns leisure into another optimization problem. The second allows leisure to be genuinely restful. Nancy Cartwright's work on the dappled world reminds us that reality is too complex and contextual for universal laws. Similarly, there's no universal formula for simple living. What feels simple varies by personality, circumstances, and cultural context. The goal isn't to follow someone else's simplicity prescription, but to develop sensitivity to what actually reduces versus increases complexity in your particular life. Some people find elaborate morning routines centering, others find them stressful. Some people thrive with detailed planning, others need spontaneity. Some people feel energized by social connection, others need solitude. Simplicity isn't one size fits all. It's about finding your own sustainable rhythm within whatever constraints you face. The effortless effort. We began with the observation that many of life's most essential processes happen effortlessly. Breathing, digesting, healing, even thinking and feeling in many contexts. Perhaps the art of simple living involves learning to trust these natural processes more and interfere with them less. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning goals and improvements. It means developing what the Taoists called Wu Wei, effortless action that works with natural patterns rather than against them. Swimming with the current rather than fighting it, even when you're swimming toward particular destinations. The great irony is that the effort to make life simpler can itself become another form of complexity. The person who reads dozens of books about minimalism, follows multiple simplicity gurus, and constantly evaluates whether their life is simple enough, has missed the point entirely. True simplicity emerges from attention to what actually matters most to you, combined with the courage to let other things be less important. It's not achievement to be optimized, but a quality of attention to be cultivated. Right now, as this video ends, you're still breathing without trying. Your heart is still beating without your management. Somewhere in your body, millions of processes are maintaining your life through intelligence that far exceeds conscious understanding. Perhaps the deepest simplicity involves remembering that you're already living, already sustained, already part of something larger than your projects and worries. Everything else, all the beautiful complexity of human culture and achievement, can be appreciated as elaboration on this basic gift rather than requirements for earning it. Life is easy, in the sense that existence itself requires no justification. People make it hard by forgetting this fundamental truth. But we can remember, and in remembering, find our way back to the effortless effort of simply being human.